Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Strategy Honestly. This is a series where we describe the main tools and concepts used in the strategy work, and also give some helpful tips what to use and when. My name is Janne, and with me I have my colleagues Pyry and Per from Reddal.
Right, and today we're switching gears a bit and talking about the framework that is a bit anti-strategy.
Right, the 7S framework. It sort of challenged whether strategy by itself is enough to define what drives success. And we're going to start off this episode with a little quiz that we hope that you figure out by the end of the episode. So the question is, what is the relationship of 7S and 3 Cs? Now you remember 3 Cs was something we discussed in the previous episode. So see if you can figure that out, and if you can't, feel free to email us and we'll give you the right answer.
Yeah, good question. But back to this episode and the topic. And this framework also caused some attempts to one-upmanship among the strategy consultants.
Yeah, there's a lot of drama about this framework. So first of all, this framework was created in the 80s, and books that brought it into the limelight were In Search of Excellence by Peters and Waterman, and then Pascale with Art of Japanese Management. And there was a lot of controversy who was the originator of this framework, and it also created a market for business books. The In Search of Excellence was one of the first bestsellers in this genre. This framework also created the concept of business gurus. And in the end, the story ended, of course, with the business gurus failing as well. So there's a lot of fun stuff about this, the history of this framework.
Right, but let's get into the substance. Here is a picture of the framework. The name 7S is pretty obvious. Each element in this framework starts with an S. It is also messy, at least if you define each element properly. Now, I called this an anti-strategy framework, and partially that can be seen here, since strategy is only one of the S's. But is there more to be said about this?
The big point about this framework is that it opened a debate on what all the elements of success are. Obviously, one can say that this framework is very fluffy, given that it's not quantitative at all, and by the way, among consultants, that was criticized a lot. However, the book that introduced the field research behind this, In Search of Excellence, became the first business book to be a bestseller, and this really started the business book's market boom. Funny enough, the other book, The Art of Japanese Management, which talked about Honda's US market entry, embarrassed some of the consulting firms that had claimed they understood the reasons behind Honda's success. The real story was very different than what the consultants thought, and that actually highlighted that this kind of soft framework can add value when driving company success.
Right, that is a good lesson. I also have understood that for many MBA students, when they are cracking case studies, they like to use this framework for making the initial diagnostic for the case, as the framework provides a way to assess the case really holistic way and helps to identifying core issues better and more broader perspective than the quantitative frameworks.
Yeah, I guess there's a trade-off here. Some frameworks are extremely quantitative, which is nice for the analysts. However, that tends to make them quite narrowly focused. Other frameworks are more holistic, like this 7S, and for management, this can give more insights.
True. I like the 7S because it's both broad and specific. Each of the S's define a particular part of the business success drivers. So 7S, in my view, is much more useful than, for example, SWOT. Also, 7S was built based on field research. True, most of the theory has since been found to be a bit flimsy. Out of the 40 plus companies that were found excellent in the book In Search of Excellence, practically all have since failed. Also, the authors were never really able to explain how these became excellent. The answer was always something like, oh, they just were like that. Other authors in the same genre have had the same fate. Jim Collins and his Good to Great and Built to Last had a similar issue. Anyway, soft elements like culture, attitude, mindset, skills are all important parts of success. Yet success is never permanent, the environment changes and companies must adapt. That's one thing that this framework in its base form misses. It's not dynamic.
Yeah, thanks guys. A lot of good background information here. But how should one use this framework in practice? Could you please help me?
Yeah, there are several ways. First is you can just evaluate a company or a business based on each of the elements and see how aligned they are. Another is to do analysis from a specific angle. Say you select skills and see how that drives the other S's. Here is a template for that.
A third way could be to make this dynamic. Evaluate the business today in terms of the 7 S's, Then introduce external disturbances, similar to what we did in the SCP framework, for example. You can see that in episode 3. And then ask how the new essay should look like. What are the gaps? What are the changes required?
Makes sense. But to me, the problem with this framework is that this is a little bit fluffy, thus subjective, and should be used as one of the tools in strategy project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The 7S is just the one tool, and in order to get the complete view, you must of course use multiple tools and process that guides you towards the answer.
Maybe that's a key point of this session as well, that strategy really is about methodology and team-based problem solving, not about individual frameworks. Now, we've been covering frameworks, and we will cover a few more of the classical ones just to give you a broad perspective on various things. But don't worry, we will get to the methodologies, team-based problem solving, and best practices in a strategy project. So that will come up in the later episodes. For now, if you like this episode, hit the subscribe button, turn on your alerts so you don't miss a future episode. And if you like our musings about strategy, you can go to Reddal.com. We have plenty of more articles and stuff there about business building and strategy. And for deeper discussions, there's also an email address on the screen. You can reach us at any time.
All right, stay sharp, stay critical, and when doing strategy, remember to drive fact-based insights and recommendations. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheerios.